I recently shot through a roll of Kodak P3200, a multi-speed black and white film with a box speed of 3200 ISO and a nominal speed of 800 ISO. I'll tell you some more about the film and show you the results that I was able to achieve in just a moment. Let me first bring you up to date with some second-hand purchases which I recently made. And I'll start off with the Yashica Dental I2, a camera back in the day that was specifically made for the dentist, so he was able to take macro photos of your teeth. And I'm not going to be using this camera, but it's more meant for my collection. And it has a fixed 100mm f4 macro lens with a built-in ring flash. This camera is in absolutely mint condition, and I was able to buy this camera, including its original case, for 35 euros, which I think is a good buy. From the same seller, I bought a P3200 FTE, which is a 35mm SLR camera. And you're probably thinking, why would you buy a P3200 FTE? Because back in the day, these cameras were inferior to the top 5, the Nikons, Canon, Olympus, Pentax, and Minolta. Well, because this specific camera is in absolute mint condition. Cosmetically, it looks as if it's a new camera, and it's also fully working. And that's why I bought the camera, because you will be hard pressed to find a P3200 FTE in this condition and also fully working. If you look on eBay, you'll find these cameras often as is or for parts, hence the inferior build quality. That's the reason that I picked up this camera with its standard 55mm 1.7 lens. And it also included a P3200 135mm 3.8 tele-lens. And I'm going to be using this camera and also making a video on the P3200 FTE. Another purchase I recently made is for a beer can lens, as it was and still is often called, because it has the form of a beer can. And it is the Minolta 70-210 autofocus zoom lens. These lenses just a few years ago would cost you more than 100 euros, or approximately $110. And I picked this one up in mint condition from a thrift store for 35 euros. They make excellent images, and this lens I'm also going to be making a video on. Something that I received totally free of charge, and it surprised me, and I'm very happy to receive another Konica Auto Reflex TC. I made a few videos on these cameras, and maybe you remember one of them broke down on me, so I needed to buy a new one. And now I was gifted this camera, including its 40mm 1.8 lens, and it is in working condition. The battery is still in the camera, and the light meter also still works. So a very happy addition to my Konica collection. Last but not least, recently, just a few days ago, I bought a Ricoh AD1. It's a point and shoot camera, but a very quirky version that they brought out. There are not very many of these Ricoh AD1 cameras. And for that reason, it really fits into my collection. I have a numerous amount of different Ricoh point and shoot cameras. I also made a few videos on these cameras, and this is probably the most quirky version that they brought out. I paid 20 euros for this camera. It is in full working condition, and cosmetically, you know, it's almost new. So happy to have this as an addition to my Ricoh collection. Right, that with regards to new purchases over the past weeks. Let's return to the Kodak P3200. Again, it is a multi-speed film with a nominal ISO of 800 and a box speed of 3200. It's the first time that I shot this roll of film, so I chose to shoot it at 3200 ISO at nighttime. And I also chose to shoot it through my Canon EOS 30, or the Elan 7E, together with its image stabilized 28mm to 135mm zoom lens. This camera and lens combination I picked up secondhand at a thrift store, and I paid €9.50. On my channel you can find a separate video on this camera. So there were a few reasons why I thought I would take out the EOS 30. Of course, because the image stabilization in the lens, because I knew even at 3200 ISO at nighttime I would be bumping up against longer shutter speeds, and the image stabilization will help me there. And the second reason is because it is autofocus, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to pinpoint focus on the subject of my choice within the composition, because I would also bump up against large apertures, for example 3.5, and that is going to give me a shallower depth of field, so pinpointing focus was going to be important. You know, I guess it depends on your shooting environment and your shooting conditions how to work with such a high ISO film. For me it was at nighttime, so more or less I had two choices. I could slightly overexpose and open up the shadows, but that would create more grain, and that's a very delicate balance, not to get unrealistic results. That's number one. And another option would be to expose for the highlights and isolate the subject within your composition, surrounding it more in the darkness. And I chose for that second option. But when you do that, composition is crucial. And I'll show you two photos now. One with a horrible composition of a photo I made, and the second photo you'll see a totally different type of composition with some light spill in the environment, which works much better. So I guess this is a personal taste to create the right atmosphere when using such a high ISO film. For me, for example, shooting these photos at nighttime, I really prefer exposing for the highlights. But then again, you really need to be aware of your composition. Well, those were my thoughts using the P3200 for the first time shooting photos at night. I hope you enjoyed the images. I'll show you them now. Thank you very much for watching. Greatly appreciate it. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and you're more than welcome to place your comment, and I'll respond to them as soon as possible. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.